Hi, welcome back to this reading series. It's been a while, but we're back. I hope you've all been well. I don't know if you've heard, but recently the government has ordered schools not to use any resources from organisations that have expressed a desire to end capitalism because it is considered an extreme political stance. Um, and on the one hand, I just find it laughable and predictable. Um, but on the other hand, I'm shocked. Like, it's pretty terrifying. Um, I'm worried that children won't be able to imagine a world beyond the oppressive one in which we live in today. Um, so that got me thinking about how powerful education is and how education has been utilized in the past as a means of preventing dissent, particularly within colonial regimes. So, with that in mind, I thought today I'd read an extract of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. And I have it as an ebook, so I can't show you the beautiful copy, but I hope you enjoy. And without further ado, let's get started. In 1935, a team of British educationalists visited French Africa, and they admitted with a mixture of jealousy and admiration that France had succeeded in creating an elite of Africans in the image of Frenchmen, an elite that was helping to perpetuate French colonial rule. To greater or lesser extent, all colonial powers produced similar cadres to manage and buttress their colonial empires in Africa and elsewhere. After the Second World War, it became obvious that colonial rule could not forever be maintained in the same form in Africa, Asia already having broken loose and Africa being restless. When the awareness that the end was in sight became generalized, the metropolitan powers turned to their colonial cadres and handed to them the reins of policy in politically independent Africa. It should be emphasized that the choice that Africa should be free was not made by the colonial powers, but by the people of Africa. Nevertheless, the changeover from colonialism to what is known as neocolonialism did have the element of conspiracy in it. In 1960, the then British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan made the oft-quoted statement that a wind of change was blowing over Africa. That was the bourgeois way of expressing what Chinese Premier, I'm so sorry if I get this wrong, Zhou Enlai, was soon to assert, namely that Africa was ripe for revolution. In order to delay or hijack the African Revolution, the colonizing powers turned to a group which they had already created for a different purpose, the elite of colonially educated Africans, from among whom were selected, wherever possible, those who were most suitable for elevation to political leadership, and the administration and military apparatus were left in the hands of similar trustworthy cadres. There were a few far-sighted Europeans who all along saw that the colonial education system would serve them if and when political independence was regained in Africa. For instance, Pierre Fonsin, a founder of the Alliance Française, stated at the beginning of this century that it is necessary to attach the colonies to the metropole by a very solid psychological bond against the day when their progressive emancipation ends in a form of federation, as is probable, that they be and they remain French in language, thought and spirit. Yet it was the British who first appreciated that they should bow to the inevitable and grant African independence. While the French introduced a few African representatives into their own parliament in France so as to try and keep African territories tied to France, the British began to prepare to hand over to certain selected Africans. In the metropolitan capitalist countries, there were and still are elite schools which provided the bulk of the political and other leadership. The English public schools of Eton, Harrow, Rugby and Winchester are well known as training grounds of the British ruling class, and by many authorities they are considered more important than the universities to which the students of such secondary schools invariably go. In France, at the secondary level, it was and still is usual to find that students emerging from places like, I might get these pronunciations wrong because I haven't done French since I was like 14, but let me try. Like the Lycée Louis le Grand and the École Normale Supérieure Rue d'Ulm are the future cabinet ministers and top executives of that country. In the USA, in spite of the myth that everyone can reach the top, a high proportion of the ruling class went to exclusive schools like the private boys' schools of Groton, St Paul's, St Mark's and Phillips Exeter. Under African conditions, anyone who went to school in the colonial period virtually entered the elite, because the numbers enjoying that privilege, even at the primary level, were so small. In addition, within each colony there tended to be at least one secondary school or higher institute, which played the role of furnishing the politico-administrative personnel of Africa in the era of political independence. The names of cabinet ministers and permanent secretaries of individual African countries can be found on the school rolls of Gordon College, Sudan, Alliance High School, Kenya, King's College, Budo, Uganda, Tabora Secondary School, Tanzania, Livingstonia, Malawi, William Ponty, Senegal, Sierra Leone Grammar School, Mfantsipim, Ghana, the Lycée Gallieni, Madagascar, and a few others. Besides, there were Makera, Forobe, and Achimota as long-standing university or near-university institutions. In retrospect, it is now very clear that one of the most significant aspects of the colonial education system was that provided by the armed forces and police. Colonial armies such as the King's African Rifles, the French Free Army, and the Congolese Force Publique produced sergeants who later became the majors and generals of independent Africa, and in several instances the heads of state. Policemen also achieved similar rapid promotion, although their political position has been rather weaker than the military proper. Like their civilian counterparts, the future police and military elite were at one time trained to be simply low-level assistants to the colonial overlords. But once independence was in sight, they were judged by the colonizers to have the requisite qualities of colonial cadres, fit to be part of the ruling class of neo-colonial Africa. In a few instances, the colonial powers towards the latter part of the colonial period rushed to train a few Africans at the metropolitan higher institutions of scientific violence, notably Sandhurst Military Academy and Hendon Police School in Britain, and Saint-Cyr Military Academy in France. Those few who were selected for such training became the cream of the military elite, corresponding to those African civilians who went to university either in Africa or abroad. Most of what emerged from the colonial educational system was not unique. Educational systems are designed to function as props to a given society, and the educated in the young age groups automatically carry over their values when their turn comes to make decisions in the society. In Africa, the colonialists were training low-level administrators, teachers, NCOs, railroad booking clerks for the preservation of colonial relations. And it is not surprising that such individuals would carry over colonial values into the period after independence was regained. The colonialists, meanwhile, took action wherever possible to ensure that persons most favourable to their position continued to man African administrations and assume new political and state police powers. Such a presentation of events would be termed one-sided by many Europeans and Africans too. In a sense, that is true, and the one-sidedness is deliberate. It is a presentation of what the colonial educational system achieved in terms of what it set itself to achieve. The other side of the matter is not the good with which colonial educators can be credited, but rather the good that emerged in spite of the efforts and intentions of the colonizers and because of the struggles of African people. I'm going to stop there for today. I hope you enjoyed that and I hope you learnt something. Keep reading and keep putting what you're reading into practice, because it's not enough to be reading about these power dynamics and not actually doing anything about them in real life. Also, send me book recommendations. I'd love to know what you guys are finding interesting or what you think I should read for this series. Just leave a comment or DM the Instagram account and I'll have a look. Yeah, with that said, I hope you guys have a good week and I'll see you next time. Bye!